All right, well, welcome back to another training on the Team Member Perspective podcast show. My name is Coulter. I am your host. We're on part 4 of 7 of the sales process series for team members. This series is all about structure. It's all about all of the pieces that allow us team members to sell at a consistent level and all of the structures that, should be there for us to have consistent production at a high level, because that's what I'm about. I want to do big things. As a team member, I always wanted to be the best. I wanted to produce at a high level, and maybe that's not you, but I assume that if you're listening to this podcast, you have desires to do more. You want to sell more. You want to become a better version of yourself. So I have no worries that, you too probably want to sell more insurance. You want to make more money. Okay, so part 4 of 7 of our sales process series is all about closing. So I want to talk about closing because part 3 was all about the presentation. And I think first things first, closing doesn't happen at the end. I think if you're new to sales and you think about closing, you might be thinking about just the very end of the conversation, closing, wrapping up the deal, right? And maybe you're hoping that they just tell you yes and you can wrap things up. Or maybe you think that closing is all about overcoming objections, okay? Which it can be, but a lot of the times what we don't think about is that closing actually happens before all of this, okay? And so I want to go through a couple different principles that have helped me close a lot of insurance, okay? The first one is this: you cannot close without extending an offer. I find in insurance, a lot of team members are frustrated with their lack of production, but in getting in the trenches with them and finding out about their process and their conversations, they're not giving people the price. They're not extending people an offer. So how in the world do we expect people to buy the product that we're pitching to people if we don't extend them an offer? We've got to get people the price. Okay. And so you cannot close a policy without extending an offer. Okay. So one thing with closing is we want to get people the price. I think getting the people the price will allow us to close more policies, believe it or not. Second thing is that, yes, we want to get people the price, but price doesn't matter until it matters. Price does not matter to the customer, to the prospect, until it matters to them. What do I mean by that? What I mean is that, if the customer doesn't feel that they might want or need your product or service, the price is irrelevant. Doesn't even matter. It's not even making in their mind. They're not even considering buying your product or your solution because they don't feel like they want it. They don't feel like that they need it. Okay. So part of a big piece of closing is that, before we give them the price, we want to make sure that there's value behind the price before we just give people quotes. Okay. The third thing is how I believe that we can build this value, deliver value before we just give people the price. And it's this: show, don't tell. Okay, we want to show people why they might want life insurance, why they might want disability insurance, why they might want an umbrella policy, instead of just telling them why they might need it. Okay, we want to show them why they would want it instead of telling them why they need it. Like, putting yourself in the mind of your customer, in the mind of your prospect, kind of allows you to understand them a little bit more, understand why they would even care. And I think that's the question that you should be able to answer. Your customer should be able to answer from the value, from your sales presentation, is why should I even care? Okay. So show them, do not tell them. Now, you notice that we haven't talked a whole lot about closing, okay? Because I think that closing is one of those things that actually doesn't necessarily happen or happen in the way that we want it to if we're missing some of these things before the actual closing happens, okay? So I hope that you're kind of seeing that instead of worrying so much about closing and overcoming objections, why don't you first look upstream and figure out how you can double down on your presentation and give people reasons to actually want what you're offering. Because when you can do that, then closing is so simple, so seamless, it's very easy. But I hope that you can see that if you aren't extending them an offer, if you're not getting them the price, well, yeah, you're not going to be able to close policies. And maybe you are getting people the price, but your presentation's poor, your delivery is poor. And so price doesn't matter to them because they don't even see why they want what you're offering, right? Like closing doesn't matter if you can't get some of these things down, okay? And then again, in your presentation, if you're just telling people why they need it, that's probably a telltale sign of why you're not closing like you want to. Instead of telling them why they need it, show them why they might want it. There's a big difference. And the next thing is that any sort of resistance or objection that you get before the price is given is actually not an objection. Okay, so let's take that out of our minds that it's not an objection. Instead, what it is an obstacle. Obstacles come before we give the price, before the price is delivered. Objections come after. Okay, I think understanding that allows you to know how to handle these obstacles that aren't necessarily objections because you haven't given them the price. Okay, and so here is what I like to do with obstacles. Okay, again, this is before you've even given them the price. And this could, come in the form of, oh, I don't need that. Or, oh, I don't want that. I only want the car insurance, right? Like whatever sort of objection that you get before the price is going to be an obstacle, okay? And because we haven't given them the price, we don't need to sit there on this obstacle and try to overcome this obstacle. Instead of trying to overcome this obstacle, think of it like just sidestepping this obstacle, sidestepping it and moving on. That's what we can do with obstacles. And here's what I like to say to sidestep these obstacles to keep the conversation going and not let that obstacle stop things from getting to the end so I can deliver a price. Okay, and it's this. You get an obstacle before you give the price. And you say, look, you got to agree with them, right? Yeah, totally. Like, absolutely. I hear that a lot, okay? But because you have a loan on your vehicle, I am going to at least look at this for you and you can tell me what you think. Yeah, I hear that a lot. But because you have this mortgage on your home and, you're the only one working, I'm going to at least look at this for you and you can tell me what you think. Okay, so I'm acknowledging it, but then I'm saying, yeah, we hear that a lot, right? Like I want to agree with them. I don't want to feel like it's me versus them. I want to agree with them, but then just let them know, hey, because of this reason right here, I'm going to at least look at this for you and you can tell me what you think. Okay, try that on for size, see how it helps you. And then the fifth thing that I want to talk about in regards to closing is what I call looping. Okay, and this is very helpful. This is when you get an objection, okay? So objections, do they come before the price or after the price? They're coming after the price. So you deliver, you extend your offer, and hopefully you've got value behind this offer. So when you deliver the offer, they kind of know why they might want that policy, that coverage in place, okay? But then you deliver the price and you get an objection. I don't need that. I need to think about it. I need to talk to my spouse, right? You name it. I have that through work. Okay, so you've gotten an objection. What we can do is what's called looping. And for a long time, in door-to-door sales, I didn't really realize I was doing this. And I didn't even really realize I was doing this when I was selling insurance. But I, incorporated and implemented looping into every single conversation where I got an objection. So looping is essentially this. You get an objection, and what you're going to want to do is you're actually going to want to obviously agree with that objection, agree with them. Yeah, I totally understand. Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Yeah, I hear that a lot, right? We want to agree. But then what we want to do is we want to loop back to the value, okay? We want to loop back to the presentation, okay? And if you remember from the last episode around the presentation, part 3 of 7 of the sales process series, in the presentation, I shared a simple framework of how to have a compelling sales presentation. And it's problem, solution, benefits. So with looping, we get the objection, we agree, we're going to loop back to this presentation and go through that again, right? And so let's say that I had, I'm talking to the customer that's calling in to add their homeowner's policy about life insurance to pay that mortgage off, okay? And they give me an objection, Coulter, I just want the homeowner's insurance, okay? This is after I've given them the price, about $150 a month. And they say, yeah, I think I just want the homeowner's insurance for now. Instead of just moving on, I'm going to loop back and I'm going to say, yeah, I totally understand that. Or, yeah, I totally get it. Now I'm going to go back into that and I'll say, where you've got that mortgage on your home, we just, want to make sure that in the event that, heaven forbid you were to pass away prematurely, that, Cindy and the kids, would never be in a position where they might have to have this added financial burden, potentially be in a position where they might have to struggle, to make this monthly payment, like on top of trying to deal with losing you and on top of, trying to be emotionally strong for the kids. We just want to make sure there's something in place that could just take care of that so they don't have to be in that position. And, I find that a lot of our customers do end up getting that coverage to just pay that off so they don't have to ever, worry about that or put their family in that type of position. Now, again, if we were to do that with your homeowner's policy, it would bring that total, to about $150 a month. So see, when you get that objection, you want to acknowledge it, but then you want to loop back and go back into value. Now, the last thing I'll say before we wrap up here is that this looping doesn't have to happen like immediately after you get this objection, because this is the next thing that I'll share is in closing, instead of always be closing, I want to change that to always be disarming. Because if you get an objection, what has just entered in to the sales conversation with that customer? They just gave you an objection. There's some sales pressure there. There's some sales resistance. Now, most people don't want to be sold to. I would argue you don't want to be sold to. I don't want to be sold to. We don't like to feel like we're selling people. Okay, so if you feel like there's sales resistance there, but you want to incorporate this looping, you don't necessarily have to go right into the looping. Maybe before you do that, maybe you want to disarm them a little bit. Maybe you want to get them to think that they're getting off the hook. Right? So maybe you go back into reviewing some of the homeowners coverages and kind of go off topic a little bit, but then later, then you're like, okay, sales resistance is kind of down now. Then go back in and loop and go into your presentation again and extend them that offer again. Make them tell you no. So guys, to recap, you cannot close without extending an offer. Make it a point to deliver quotes, deliver the price to people. Now, the price and the quotes aren't going to matter until it matters. So in your presentation, before you give them this price, you want to show them, don't tell them, show them why they would even care about getting your product or service. Okay? Obstacles, if you get these premature objections, which we've now labeled obstacles before you give them the price, don't feel like you have to overcome that. Just sidestep that puppy. Okay? Obstacles come before the price. Objections will come after. And if you do get an objection, you can implement looping to give yourself another shot at explaining the value. Help your customer, think about it again. Think about it twice, 3 times. But also it can give you another opportunity to make your customer tell you no. Appreciate you guys. Hope this helps. Like, subscribe, share with your agent friends, share with your team member friends. That's my only ask. We are on part 4 of 7 of our sales process series. So stay tuned for the next one.